and welcome to episode 7. This episode is very proudly sponsored by the Cultivating Creative.
The Cultivating Creative is a 4-week writing course designed for all abilities, young and old. Its aim is to break down the barriers of self-judgment that we place on ourselves and to bring out the creative abilities that we all possess. To find out more information about this course, head to www.cultivatingcreative.com.
Sounds great.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, so in this episode, we are talking about the Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams. In case you haven't had a chance to read it yet or need a little recap, this is a historical novel, all to do with the writing of the very, very first Oxford English Dictionary, which took over 40 years to write, from about the 1880s to the early 1920s. It mixes fact and fiction in that there is a couple of fictional characters. The main character, Esme, a young girl, is fictional, but her father works at the scriptorium in Oxford where the words were collected and the dictionary was collated. I chose this book because it ticked so many boxes for me. I've always been an absolute word geek, as you know. I love words. I love dictionaries. I always have. When I was at uni, back in England, after I left school, I studied English language and literature, and in the English language department library, they had a complete set of first edition Oxford English Dictionary. So 26 volumes. It was absolutely massive. And I was just fascinated by it. And you weren't allowed to take the dictionaries out, but you could request a volume. So I often used to go into the library and read and look up the words. And
so cute.
I know. And read them. But having said that, I actually didn't know all that much about how the dictionary came about and was written. So I found the whole history of the writing and this book absolutely fascinating. And I think also the time in which it was written, that period at the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century, is a time that I find particularly interesting. So the background of the First World War and that whole women's suffrage movement in the UK. It's an area of history that I grew up with. I mean, I wasn't alive then, but certainly at school,
you heard about it and read about it
and studied it. So, so I liked all of those elements of the book. What did you think?
I'm nervous to talk about it because I know how excited you are over this particular one. For me, it wasn't my favorite book that we've read.
Yeah.
I think, but one of the great things about having a book club is encouraging you to read books that you probably wouldn't necessarily pick up. Yeah,
I mean, you've never particularly liked historical novels.
I do if they are World War II, and onwards, but anything from World War I or before, I've never really drawn much. I haven't really found relatable, or I've never really found a connection to that. I think the thing with this book and why it's probably an area or that time period is something that I don't generally get drawn to. I think it's because I don't find it very relatable. And I think that's probably because the world has evolved so much.
Yeah.
And I've had the privilege to grow up in a very different time.
Yeah.
Where women's suffrage and that movement is something that, my grandmother, my great-grandma, it's already past. So it's it's not really something that characters that are written in that world are never something that I get really necessarily drawn to. I think the thing that I really did like in this book, though, I mean, it's any book, I think it's really important when you've left the book to feel like you have taken something away from it, is although I find the dictionary and words often very intimidating and confronting, I thought it was really fascinating to understand how the dictionary was put together.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Especially, I think, because it's something I've never really thought about. I've always just used the dictionary as a resource. I've never really considered the thought or the process that goes into our English language. So I've always just,
Yeah, and I think the important thing about the Oxford English Dictionary that's different to most dictionaries. In fact, any dictionary that you'd have used at school, or I have a copy of the Macquarie dictionary,
which, by the way, is like this thick.
Yeah, but it's not 26 volumes.
Yeah.
But they all just give definitions and meanings for the word. They don't actually put them in context. So they don't give historical usage of the word, which obviously the Oxford English Dictionary is the only dictionary in the world that does that. And that was so fascinating.
Yeah, it really it really was a history lesson in something that I would probably never have indulged into learning about that. So and I think the really cool thing about this novel too is that although it is fiction, like you said before, there are still true events. Like, it still followed the timeline of.
Very much so, and the author said that she was very, very careful to include the exact chronology of the timeline of the dictionary, and lots of the people are real people, and the bondmaid, the word that was missing, actually was missing.
Yeah.
So I think that is really interesting.
How did you feel about the characters in this?
Like you, I have to say, even though it's my pick and I really enjoyed the book, I kind of feel as though the way it was written, so the language it was written in, and even the characters almost were secondary. And that's not a negative thing by any ways or means. I think it's, as you said, it reads as a personalised history book.
Yeah, I agree.
An accessible history book. So even though the character of Esme, obviously the main character, is fictional, I didn't really have any great expectations.
Yeah.
Of her. I don't really feel as though the book was particularly a character-based driven book.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I think so. And one of the things, and this isn't a negative thing, this is just something that I observed. I don't know whether or not the characters, not stereotypical in the sense, but that the events that happened kind of had been something that I've read about and heard about before.
Yeah.
So to me, actually, the character that struck the most interest was Mabel, the lady that worked in the market. Just because I found her story really interesting, because that was a perspective that I hadn't really read much about before or seen in movies before. And she added this element of just the funniness, really. And also was another really good indication for a period piece stamp. Like, the way she spoke and the way that her experiences of the world and what she was teaching Esme were so in contrast to her world in the scriptorium that I found that her character really probably the most interesting out of all of them. And almost, I felt Esme's was almost not matter of fact, but even though she had her own trauma and went through a lot as well, I kind of, there wasn't as much substance, I think, with her character, because I think it was more driven about her input with the...
She was a conduit, really, to telling the story.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than necessarily... Yeah, I can see that.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no,
was there
a
character that really stood out for you?
I actually really liked the character of Dita.
Yeah.
Esme's godmother.
Pseudo auntie,
pseudo godmother.
Yeah.
And there were two reasons I think that I liked her. One is that she was based on a very real character, a lady called Edith Thompson, who basically spent much of her life actually working on the dictionary and sending in words and editing them and defining the meanings.
Which, by the way, if you don't know much about that time, that was very unusual. Yeah. She was a one-off lady.
There were very, very, very few women who worked on the dictionary. But what I liked about her was the author Pip. I heard her talking about the book and about this character and about the real character of Edith Thompson, and there's actually not that much known about her. I mean, there's a whole lot of documentation and correspondence, letters and so on, in her work on the dictionary. But her personal life and what kind of a person she was, nothing remains. So we don't actually know.
Wow.
So Pip was in a dilemma because she really wanted to include her as a character, but obviously needed to sort of flesh her out.
Yeah.
But she didn't want to do the real character a disservice. So that's why we kind of had like the Dita side to her, which is the fictional side to her when she's dealing with Esme and Esme's father. And then we had the Edith character, which records sort of the true story of her work on the dictionary. And I thought that Pip was really successful in doing that, because I really actually warmed to this sort of slightly eccentric, blue stocking, middle-aged woman who was so academic on one hand, but also so down to earth and looked out for Esme and helped to guide her. So I really enjoyed her character.
I think the most interesting things with putting together the dictionary and also in this novel is that there was such a lack of female influence.
Yeah, very much so.
And my understanding from reading this is that, as you said, particularly with the Oxford Dictionary, is they use the word in a sentence to give you an example of the context.
Yeah.
And that was based off research, because, to publish something with, the credentials, or to publish something properly, you have to be referencing real life works where that word has been used.
Yeah, because the Oxford English Dictionary,
but you know what I mean.
Yes, because the Oxford English Dictionary has always been an academic dictionary.
Yeah, academic was the word. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then, of course, at that time, there weren't actually very many published works published by female authors, or even in newspaper articles or anywhere. There were very, very little. Females weren't really in the published world.
Yes, because at the time that the dictionary was being compiled, so by late Victorian times, then there were plenty of published female authors. But the whole point about the dictionary was defining the first usage of a particular word in order to give it credence. And so that was historical. So, it went back to Shakespeare or to Chaucer, or even, in many words to the Greek authors. In a historical context, and women weren't. Well, even if women did write, they certainly weren't published. So it's a very gendered construct.
Yeah, And it's something that I've never really considered or thought about. And I think the theme that this book brings up is, are there words for women and are there words for men? And is a single word, does it mean different things if it's spoken to a woman or to a man, or if it's spoken about a woman or a man? And it plays with this whole thing of gender, and I think the interesting thing about it is, even though the dictionary was put together to be as you say, an academic resource, as something that was true, was there bias when that was put together?
There has to have been. I mean, there's actually another really, really lovely anecdote.
Yeah.
That, that we know that the vast majority of the people who contributed to the definitions and the words for the dictionary were men. And the references that they used were from men. Were male, but there were a number of women who actually did work on the dictionary. Edith Thompson was one, and James Murray, who was the editor, his wife and a couple of his daughters worked on it, and also the daughter of the man whose name escapes me for the moment, but he ran the Oxford University Press, so they all worked on the dictionary. But when the dictionary was finally published in 1928, they held a launch dinner, and none of the women were invited. So it was all men. And there was some concession given to the women. The women were actually allowed to sit up on the balcony overlooking the men eating their dinner, and they were given a copy of the menu of the food that the men were eating as a souvenir. I mean, how extraordinary is that?
And as Mum and I were, before each episode, we always do a little bit of research and do a bit more digging, but we thought probably the best thing would be to give some examples and to discuss them between us, whether or not, is that word female or implied for females only, or is it a man's word, or is it derogatory of either gender? Yeah,
I mean, this, reading this book and doing a bit of research about it did. I mean, both of us really started to think about male and female words, and
even ones that I use and I didn't even. Yeah. I use it in common language and don't really necessarily think about, well, what is the actual meaning of that word, and am I being dismissive of any sort of gender or any sort of inequality? Anyway, let's get into it.
So we'll just dig the iPad out from underneath the cushions and let's have a look at some words. Okay, feisty.
Feisty.
Can a man be feisty?
I definitely feel like it is used more in a feminine way, like, oh, she was a bit feisty. And weirdly, I think it also is implied to animals. I feel like that cat was
caught.
That cat was a bit feisty, or like But I don't think I've
ever heard a man being called
feisty. No, me either.
A child could be feisty.
Yeah.
I suspect that a little boy.
Yeah.
Do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know.
A little boy could be feisty, maybe, but I think generally it's
a female.
It's a female.
And is it used to be a negative word?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not negative, but I feel like it's implying that they showed resistance, or they showed they weren't put, whoever you're
not
implying.
Ladylike tendencies.
Not ladylike tendencies. All right, next. What's the next one?
Okay, emotional.
Emotional. I think definitely this word, even through my growing up, my coming of age, I think emotional has changed. I think definitely it was, when I was younger, it was a word that explained a woman, like, she's being so emotional. Or even I think also toddlers can be, they're very emotional.
Yeah.
And
as in not being able to control their emotions?
Yeah, exactly. As in not being able to control their emotions. Yeah. I think the cool thing with emotional now is I feel like it's started to change in that I feel like women are now saying emotional to men to be condescending to them if they're like behaving or having a big reaction.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you think so? I mean, can a man not be emotional? I mean, I'm kind of thinking, you know, that these days that we expect our men both to be manly, but also to be sensitive. So, can emotional not be used in a positive way?
I think it definitely can be used in a positive way, but I think the way that I would use it is if I was talking to a girlfriend and, you know, my boyfriend or whatever was having a hissy fit or being annoyed about something, I would turn to her and say, oh, he's being a bit emotional. But even then, I'm going, well, actually, I'm being kind of condescending because I'm using it the way that I'm so used to it being used towards me or towards a female. Yeah. So I think that word is changing and developing.
Okay. All right. I've got one. Ditzy.
100% female.
100% female.
100% female.
When has there ever been a ditzy man?
I don't think I've never met a ditzy man.
Okay,
I've never called a man ditzy.
No.
But isn't that so bad that we're laughing? Because ditzy is just
it's so derogatory.
It's so derogatory. Yeah, we are comfortable with laughing at it. Yeah.
Okay, bossy.
Bossy.
Can a man be bossy? Or a woman can certainly be bossy.
Woman is definitely bossy. Again, children, bossy. I feel like you always hear children calling each other, oh, you're being a bit bossy. But
I actually kind of think that maybe a man can be bossy.
Yeah. Oh, he was being a bit bossy.
He was being a bit bossy. But again, maybe that's like the, you know,
like emotional, like it's starting to develop. It's changing.
Yeah.
Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That we would say, well, I mean, bossy is always slightly derogatory, but you're going like, oh, stop being so bossy.
Yeah, I think I would say that. Just a man, I would say, oh, geez, he was a bit bossy.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Frumpy.
I don't think I've ever called a man frumpy.
I think I'm going to start calling men frumpy.
I'm also going, like men that wear like really baggy jeans might maybe have a bit of a stomach. I would say they were a bit frumpy.
But frumpy,
those jeans look a bit frumpy.
But frumpy kind of has the connotations.
Frumpy's very English.
It's very English, and it is very sort of blue stocking. It's. I don't think, and I think there's also sort of a lot of socioeconomics with frumpy.
Yeah.
It's kind of Miss Marple.
Yeah.
You know, it's English villages or English
and poorly dressed. I think as well. It's not so
English
much
old English school teachers, Enid Blyton sort of type things. It's frumpy.
I think you're right. I think it does have a socio-economic twist to it. What else have you got?
Okay. What about hysterical?
Hysterical. I think that is a pretty strongly traditional word for a female. Like back in the days when being hysterical was a psychiatric.
Oh, you could be committed. I mean, not that long ago,
right?
Yeah.
And the word would always be used as if a woman shows signs of hysteria or is hysterical, that they therefore are insane and have to be committed. So I think traditionally that's definitely been something that you would. I feel like maybe that word is also starting to change. I think.
Do you? I'm not sure that it.
I don't think in the same way. I don't think in the way that I think it's more used, if you were using it with a male, it would be more of a sympathetic thing. Like he was so upset, he was hysterical. Rather than the way that it's traditionally being used to dismiss female for uncontrollable emotions. Like if you know, if somebody had died and there was a friend of mine, you know, and he was very, very upset, I would say he was
so
hysterical. Upset, he was hysterical. It was so heartbreaking. Okay. But I would never call a man hysterical with the same derogatory meaning as what it has traditionally been used for a female.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would say that he was just overwhelmed or overcome rather than hysterical. What about pushy?
Both. I'm going to say both.
You think both?
Definitely both. Definitely.
Yeah.
I think like male bosses can be like, I feel like that's overbearing. He was very pushy. It's interesting because I feel like the common theme here is that the words are changing and developing.
Yeah.
But pushy, I definitely think can be a male, but I think there's a stereotype to a pushy male.
Okay, yeah. But isn't there a stereotype to a pushy woman too?
I feel like any woman that is demanding something or asking for something,
or is being seen as ambitious,
or requesting something will immediately get told they're being pushy. But I think what I'm trying to say is I feel like women are so quick to be called pushy.
Yeah.
But for a man, I think you can call a man pushy, but I feel like they would really have to be being pressing, like really persistent.
I kind of think that maybe, in a male context, then it means more sort of unpleasant persistence. Rather than just being ambitious or asking for something, which I think...
So I feel like you can use pushy for a male, but I do feel like women get... receive that word or be, given that name a lot quicker. Like the scale of being told someone's pushy is a lot less.
Yeah.
Don't you reckon?
Yeah, yeah. What about frigid? That's a woman. That's a woman. Frigid is a woman. Yeah.
Such a sad word.
Cold, frigid.
Yeah, but it's used in such a horrible way.
Oh, it's a horrible word. It's an absolutely horrible word.
It is horrible.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's used in the sense of that if you're self-respecting, you're frigid. But yet if you are, you venture into, kissing a guy or being involved, then automatically you're deemed the opposite. You're promiscuous.
Yeah.
So I feel like frigid is such a condescending word, but yet then you're the opposite, I feel like, so commonly. What do you reckon?
No, I agree. I mean, I don't think there's anything good about the word frigid except if it's talking about the weather.
I don't think I've ever called the weather frigid.
It looks a little frigid today.
Really? I've never heard that context. That's funny.
It's cold.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, it's cold.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever called a guy frigid.
No.
And I don't think I've ever heard anyone call a guy frigid.
No. A guy can't be frigid by definition, really.
The other interesting thing when I was doing, it's not on your list, but when I was doing some research into it, I was looking at words with their meaning before the dictionary came out.
Yeah.
So a really good example is, so the word governess. What does governess mean to you? What do you think governess is?
A governess, a teacher, a head, like a.
But particularly of children, generally.
Could also be like a governess of a prison, like somebody who's a female authoritative figure.
So maybe that's a bad example because the word actually did derive from being a woman of authority. Yeah. But more commonly it is used as
as somebody who looks after children.
Yeah. For example, Mary Poppins. What were they looking for? They were looking for a governess, somebody to look after their children, right?
Yeah.
Which again is another, you've taken the word from meaning a woman of authority and you've dismissed her to then being a person of childcare. And then the other really interesting word that I didn't know the meaning of was hussy. So what does a hussy mean to you? If I was to call you a hussy, what would you think I would be meaning?
You would be calling me promiscuous.
Yeah, I would be calling you getting around a bit too much, Mum. Right? The word hussy actually meant housewife. It was like a Scandinavian word.
Oh, really?
That actually means housewife.
Okay.
So it didn't mean any of the promiscuous kind. It actually just meant, to be the housewife. And one more really interesting word that I was blown away by, which was all before the dictionary came out, was tart. If I'm calling you a tart... Or I'm describing someone, Mum, she was such a tart. What do you think I'd be saying?
Again, but I think it varies. Because you'd be calling them a
What's
prostitute.
the first thing you're assuming?
A prostitute.
Prostitute.
Yeah.
But did you know the original meaning of tart was another word of sweetheart? So to call someone a tart, it was actually an endearing term to compliment somebody.
But that's actually what I was going to say, because growing up in the UK, my girlfriends and I used to call each other "you old tart."
Yeah, I've heard that, but I've never. I've always thought it was a bad thing.
Hello, you old tart.
Yeah,
and not in a derogatory way. So obviously in a more historical way.
That's so funny.
I don't think I haven't said that for a long time, but yeah, we did. We call it, oh, you old tart.
So I think the point that we're getting at is, I think it's just interesting the way that when you've got an academic transcript like the Oxford Dictionary, is there bias in it? Should the dictionary be something that is completely, this is what the word means, or should it be giving you a contextual example? And if it does give you a contextual example, should it be swayed, should it be neutral to gender or any sort of discrimination?
I mean, I think the thing about that is that the Oxford English Dictionary doesn't determine what words mean. Mm-hmm. Basically, it records usage. Mm-hmm. So it's always going to be historical. Mm-hmm. At the moment, they're actually working on the 3rd edition. And actually, go figure, like 3 editions in 100 years.
Yeah. There must be some serious changes.
Completely. Yeah. So, but back to the point that it only records the way words are commonly used. So it's always going to be catching up. It's never actually going to be where the English language is now at any current point, because words get added, words fall out of usage, the meaning of words changes. And I think it would be quite tricky or quite dangerous if the dictionary did start trying to predetermine the way in which a word could be used, because again it's going to change.
That's that question.
Because again it's going to change.
But the question in that is that if we don't know the word and we look it up and it does have a derogatory meaning or a discriminating meaning, is the first experience that we've had with that word and been taught how to use it, we're getting taught to use it in that sort of a way.
I mean, that's tricky, isn't it?
It is. Because I find it interesting that at universities now, you're not allowed to write from his or her perspective. It's what's the word when you're writing from?
You're gender neutral.
You're gender neutral throughout.
Yeah.
So I find it really fascinating that through academia, you have to be gender fluid, non-specific, right? But yet the Oxford Dictionary or the dictionary at this point still isn't.
But because it is recording usage, it's not determining. Yeah. It's different. I mean, at universities you have a style guide. We have over there on the shelf. There is the Australian style guide, which is there as a reference manual for writers and editors and so on, as to how words should be used, and obviously that will change over a period of time, whereas the Oxford English Dictionary is meant to stand for all time, and it does record how usage has changed. Has
an
changed.
Amazing period stamp, isn't it?
So no, I am firmly on the on the side of leave the dictionary alone.
Yeah. Well, I just don't know. I don't know where I sit with that.
But I think the thing is though, and the beauty of having things like the reference of the internet and so on, and a non-official academic dictionaries like the Urban Dictionary or Google or I mean I do it all. I'm not so diehard and old school that I will always look things up in a hard copy of a dictionary. And, I'll be Googling them and going, oh, what does that mean? Or what was the context in which it was used? And I think that maybe that is the two resources together
That's more what I wonder. I mean, I'm not for or against. I just think this book really brought the question in my mind is, should a dictionary purely just state what the word means, and then we use resources like the Urban Dictionary or Google or other things to find context in which that is word's used. For example, or even your parents or anyone like, you know, I used to hate when you always used to say, look it up in the dictionary. I'm like, I don't want to go and get your big dictionary. Like, Mum, just tell me what the word means. Give me an example of what the word means.
Yeah.
So I wonder, you know, if, I guess time will only tell when the next edit comes out.
Yeah.
Will the sentences that give example or context to what the word means, will they be gender neutral? Will they get rid of all of the discrimination that it has previously been? Because there 100% has been discrimination in the dictionary. Or will it not? And I think for me, that's what got me excited about the book. Something that I necessarily didn't first enjoy, but then came to realize how cool it's taught me something about our language that we use every day. So
what do you think?
Yeah, what do you think? Let us know. What should the Oxford Dictionary tell us?
What should the Oxford English Dictionary tell us? Should it determine how words are used, or should it be a reference of how words have been used?
Now, I'm pretty excited because we opened it up to all of you guys to select what our July books will be. And we did this big vote. Well, we had 6 books and we reined in all of your votes, and we have 2 decisive winners, and we are about to discuss the first winner, which is
The Coconut Children by Vivian Pham.
I was so excited that you had all picked The Coconut Children by Vivian Pham because I had actually already read it. And I absolutely love this story. It is essentially a coming-of-age story with a teenage romance between a character called Sunny and Vince. And they both grow up in this area in West Sydney called Cabramatta, which has, in the 90s, which actually is known for having a lot of drug problems, and it's
pretty rough.
It's a pretty rough area of Sydney, but there is a large population of Vietnamese refugees that live there, and both Sunny and Vince, their families are refugees from Vietnam, and they came over on the boats. So really interesting story, but also very, very sweet. So I hope you all enjoy it, and I cannot wait to see you all reading it along with us.
All right, okay. Well, actually, just before we go, I hope you will notice, even though Catie doesn't like historical novels and she's not interested in anything that took place before the Second World War, I hope you will notice her little Victorian outfit today.
Well, look, I might not like reading about Victorian era, but I like dressing up for the part. Thank you for noticing. All right, everybody.
Okay, so until next time.
See you soon. Happy reading.
We hope you enjoyed watching this episode.
If you did, please leave us a comment below. We'll see you soon.